Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us each week, when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry. We hear about their origin story, and then we dig into some industry related topics. Other times when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the industry. Now, today we have industry news for you, and joining me as always is Charles Covey. How's it going today, Charles?
Hey.
So before we jump in, I want to touch on something that we talked about at the beginning of the last episode that we did on industry news, and that was my call to action for getting people to leave us a rating and review. So I think we had a case of the bystander effect is what I think happened. So we ended up with 2 ratings left on Apple Podcasts and 2 on Spotify, no reviews. And so knowing that we've got hundreds of people listening to this every single week, I figure that I think others thought others were going to go ahead and leave the ratings and reviews. So I'm not going to dig into this every single week or anything like that, but I will put out one more call to action to all of you listening in. If you wouldn't mind going and leaving us a rating and review on Apple or leaving us a rating on Spotify, it does really help us out with getting in front of more people who are interested in land development content. So if you take the time to do that, I think it'll just take a minute or two to hop over and do that within the app. Again, really appreciate it if you take the time to do that. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into today's topics. We're going to do a revisit of the California wildfires and kind of see where we're sitting at there today. And then most of what we've got going on in the industry in general is related to the current administration. So we're going to be digging into a couple articles related to some activity that's happening related to the Trump administration. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our first article of the day. The headline reads, and this one comes to us from Housing Wire. The headline reads, new HUD secretary prioritize GSE privatization, potential department name change. So reading from the article, now that he has been confirmed and sworn in as the 19th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner said he plans on moving to act on what he calls a Trump administration priority, privatization of the government-sponsored enterprises, GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. A name change of HUD is also being discussed as a possibility, he said. This is according to an interview with Turner published Wednesday by the Wall Street Journal. He said he will aim to coordinate work with Congress, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and the Department of the Treasury. Citing his 9-year tenure as an NFL player, Turner said he will aim to work as a quarterback to get the process over the finish line. But the road to get such plans implemented and vetted faces headwinds. Members of the administration have sent mixed signals on how much of a priority privatization will be, and any supporting legislation would need to be passed by a historically divided Congress with little room for Republican defection on any measure. There's also the question of how big a priority the GSEs are for the president himself. While he and certain officials close to him spoke about GSE privatization on the campaign trail, administration officials have sent mixed signals since assuming power on how much of a priority it will be in the short to mid-term. As for HUD itself, Turner is vowing to root out inefficiencies and improve home affordability access, according to the interview. In pursuit of compliance with various executive orders handed down by the president in January, Turner said that all programs and policies will be looked at with a fine-tooth comb, including any with language related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. During the Senate confirmation hearing, Turner also spoke about his desire to return HUD staffers to work in the office, which the Journal and other outlets have said would likely drive some workers to leave. Deregulation is a priority, while Turner also referenced a desire to continue developing opportunity zones, a remnant from the first Trump administration in which Turner served as the head of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council and oversaw private investment in these areas. The White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council was abandoned by the Biden administration. Turner added that he may also seek to change the name of HUD itself in an effort to better reflect its reach, which he said should include rural and tribal communities. But arriving at a new name would require support from lawmakers and take a lot of time and conversation and thought, Turner said. So that was a lot there to take in general. But what are your thoughts on this, Charles, as you see, Turner step into that role and get started?
Well, I think there's definitely some potential to revamp, and I think we're going to see changes, and necessary too. I mean, this particular organization has been outdated for a while, so this seems like the right guy. I don't know him personally. He lives here in Dallas, not actually in Frisco, not far from me. So I don't know him personally, but I know people that do know him, and everybody speaks really highly of the guy. So it sounds like he's generally a good dude and very well versed in a lot of the things that his previous employer, JPI, is the largest multifamily builder in Texas, one of the largest in the country, and so he's got boots on the ground kind of experience with how these things go together, and I think that's a great perspective to have in that kind of position. He's not a career bureaucrat. He knows what actually goes on, and frankly, I think his NFL experience is completely unrelated and doesn't even matter. He's got actual industry experience that far supersedes any of that kind of celebrity status from playing in the NFL. The whole thing about the name change, who cares, right? It probably needs to be changed, but really let's see some actual stuff happen. The privatization is a huge element that I think the private world tends to run things better. Let's just call it how it is. Government tends to create inefficiencies and escalate costs in a way that is just not efficient for the American public. So if we really want this to run better, give it to private industry and let them handle it. That's a great process, and I think we're going to see a lot of that as a general theme across this administration's 4 years of let business do what it does and keep government out of it as much as possible. So that's I think a beautiful way to approach it, and I think he's going to be able to have a pretty long lasting impact on that department before he's out of here. Could you go back a couple of pages? There was something I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah, so the divided Congress may make it tough for him to do any of these like name changes, the privatization. That's challenging just because it's going to take a couple of years to get this done. You can't just have a nice. This is not executive order kind of stuff. So that may take some time, and really, frankly, doesn't have that big of a direct effect on the average person in the near term. I do think that the Opportunity Zone program is really effective, and it does a good job of getting projects in rural areas and suburban areas that need it. And I haven't done a Opportunity Zone project, but we've almost done several, and so I'm really familiar with the program. And because he was so heavily involved with that in previous administrations, I think he's gonna be a champion for that. It just sounds like in the stuff that he said that he really likes that program and sees a lot of value. And because he knows it so well, that's something he wants to leave his mark on. So I would expect a lot of Opportunity Zone stuff, and that's something he can make that happen pretty quickly, I think, because it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard for Congress to push back on that one. Like it's pretty much a win for everybody.
Yeah, I just had a couple things on this. One was, I think in general, the Trump administration has been pretty supportive of action, and in general. So I think that he's going to have a lot of people in his corner, from the Republican Party. Now, again, the question will be about the divided Congress. Like, how will some of these ideas that he wants to implement be played out? I think the other thing too that you see continually coming up with a lot of what's happening with the Trump administration and what Doge is doing with getting rid of some of the inefficiencies and shrinking down some of these departments and getting rid of people. They're also having a lot of calls to come back into the office, and I think it's interesting in a lot of these articles. They talk about how it's going to cause a lot of people to not want to work there if you have to come into the office. And the construction industry in general, people that are out there working, they don't get the opportunity to work from home, right? So I think people who constantly, quote unquote, white collar jobs who can work from home, and they complain about the fact that an employer is going to require them to come into the office. And it's like, yeah, if you don't want to go to the office, then go find another job where you can work remotely if there's one that's actually going to be available. But otherwise, like, I'm kind of tired of people complaining about having to go back into the office as if like it's their company, or like they have a big say in it. I mean, the company is going to see the outcome based on what the workforce does. Now, if the workforce overwhelmingly isn't willing to go into the office, then the company's going to have a problem because they're not going to be able to find any workers. But I don't see that being the case. I mean, there's people out there who want work, and they'll go into the office if it means they need to, if they're going to have a job. So I don't know. We'll see how that all plays out, both from a public standpoint in these public roles, but also in the private sector too. So you just keep seeing that pop up.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's keep moving along here. Let's get to the second article, which comes to us from Fox Business. The headline reads, "Federal aid for California wildfires should not come with conditions," says celebrity real estate agent. So this one here is going to be a video from Fox Business. So we're going to go ahead and play this, and then we will react.
Mauricio Umansky is a celebrity real estate agent and the founder and CEO of the agency. Mauricio joins me now. Should the fire aid come with conditions, and what conditions do you want to see?
How you doing, Stuart? Hope you're doing good. No, the fire aid should not come with conditions. These are people, the neighborhoods have been absolutely devastated. These are real people, they're tax-paying people. And we're dealing with them on a daily basis. And the amount of pain that they're going through is incredible. And this is a devastation that should never have happened. At these levels.
But are taxpayers entitled to a word about what California's got to do to get the money? I mean, surely we can put conditions for example, on cleaning and irrigating the forests, and ending the Coastal Commission. I mean, can we place conditions at any kind? Do we just have to fork out the money?
No, we should not just fork out the money. There should be, it's an opportunity, I think, for the Republican Party to show that we can meet in the middle and to negotiate. And that's where I was heading with that. There is an opportunity for us to put some conditions on the relief, but it should almost be separated. I think Trump's amazing at this. He'll know how to negotiate this deal the best. But it is an opportunity to show California, that has generally been a Democratic state, that we are willing to meet in the middle, that we are willing to help. And there should definitely be conditions. This can never happen again. We need to prevent this in the future.
Earlier this morning, we had a real estate developer on the show who's big in California, Florida, New York, and he suggested that Trump should demand using voter ID cards, for example, in California in the future, end sanctuary state status, quit funding homeless camps, clean and irrigate the forest. Those are political conditions. Can you see the way open to some political conditions for the aid?
There's definitely an opportunity to create that. And, I don't understand why we don't have voter ID in order to vote in California. I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world. But again, we need to take care of our citizens. We need to take care of our tax-paying people, while at the same time being very cautious about how we ask for the conditions. And I do think that there's a path to have conditional aid. But at the end of the day, we do have to take care of these people. So hopefully we can just find that balance. And I think that that's one of the things that's happening today, is we're not finding middle and we're not finding balance. And I hope we can do that. And I hope that we can help the people. And I hope that we can make California better and not deal with this again.
Those thousands of people who lost their homes, have they lost their wealth forever?
In a lot of cases, yes, they've lost their wealth forever. Insurance companies, a lot of them are not well insured or underinsured. They're going to have a hard time rebuilding. It's an absolute mess, and people are absolutely devastated, and they don't know what to do right now. There's a lot of questions and very few answers still.
Got it. Mauricio, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We all understand the position that LA is in, and we do have deep sympathy. Mauricio Umansky, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So, real quick, before getting your thoughts on this, I think two things. Number one, the headline is misleading. So, I think his the guest thoughts on the whole conditions, whether there should be conditions, I think it was more so from a homeowner standpoint, whether they should have conditions on any funds that they get. But in general, I do think this was an interesting conversation or interesting topic, because I do think there's opportunities here for. Like you had talked about this on our last industry news episode, I believe, where you're talking about how, the federal government can come in certain spots and they can say, hey, we want to step in and help out, but here's some things that we need to see out of the state or the administration or things of that nature. So anyway, interested to get your thoughts on what you think about kind of in general this topic of any conditions associated with the money that would go to the state?
So my general feeling is that absolutely twist their arm and try to get some of this shit fixed that they haven't been able to fix. Like this is a very Trump-esque way to do it, right? He's doing it with all these other countries. So essentially, like, okay, make California tighten things up and tidy up their mess, and protect the people in a better way. The other side of that is, I think the Constitution is set up in a way that states are supposed to have some certain ways to basically screw up on their own. And I don't know that we want to meddle with that, because then that sets a precedent of taking away control from the states. And I think that that's still largely a good thing. So maybe California is just going to be a mess. And if you don't like it, don't live there. Maybe it's that simple. So I don't know the constitutional ramifications there. So it's something we probably should look up, because I think that there's probably, my guess is there's some limitations on what they should and shouldn't do. So that's a whole different issue. There's some very simple things to prevent problems like this, though. And so because of the federal agencies that are involved, CAL FIRE is the organization out there that handles all their wildfire stuff. And then you've got the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, all these federal agencies that kind of interact with them a little bit. You can do what we call the wildland urban interface, is this area where wildland areas butt up to homes and residential areas. And so that wildland urban interface has not been well managed by California. You can go in and put a 200-foot buffer or 250-foot buffer around every residential area, like every area where you've got a wildland urban interface, coming together, and you either do controlled burns, or you do clearing, or you plant and irrigate succulents and other green things. Like there's plenty of ways to mitigate this. And my dad has a business that does this. And so I've been doing controlled burns and wildfires for most of my life. So just to see this happen out there just seems brainless. Like it seems like, guys, this is not rocket science. This is like simple 2 + 2 = 4 kind of stuff. So I don't know if maybe there's a way that even within the Constitution, we can still kind of mandate that some of this stuff gets done in order to get the money, because we don't want this to happen again. It just seems like the whole state didn't burn up, just areas. There's still plenty of other places in California that have this exact same issue that could also have this same problem. So that part's kind of frustrating. I hope that they get something fixed there. Some conditions would be wise. I'd still like us to stay within, the constitutional ramifications, but I think conditions would be the best way to go.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. As some of you know, I started Groove several years ago, and my team and I built the platform based on industry feedback and have approached land acquisition and deal management differently than other mapping platforms. Specifically with Groove, we created a centralized map where all research, deals, and activity can be tracked and accessed by your entire team. Whether you just need to do landowner research and find out who owns a parcel, or find out all parcels owned by an individual, or like many of our customers, maybe you want to manage your entire deal workflow in Groove, the platform has been built to support how your business operates. If this sounds like something of interest to you, you can start a free trial by going to letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the third and final headline or article. This one comes to us from Newsweek. The headline reads, Trump tariffs could nearly triple lumber costs, raising housing concerns. So reading from the article, some experts speculate tariffs could exacerbate these challenges, making it harder for builders to procure affordable materials and for buyers to find reasonably priced homes. According to Carl Harris, chairman of the National Association of Homebuilders, over 70% of softwood lumber and gypsum, which is used in drywall, originate from Canada and Mexico and serve as critical construction materials. In a recent analysis, Robert Deitz, chief economist at the NAHB, outlined the risks posed by tariffs as it relates to lumber costs. Tariffs on lumber are a near-term concern, with the existing duty rate expected to increase from a current 14.5% rate to near 40% later this year, Deitz said on Wednesday. An additional 25% tariff could strongly affect lumber costs. This is why regulatory reform that reduces the cost of land development, home construction, and remodeling is now even more critical for improving housing attainability. Per Deitz, not only could they nearly triple the cost of lumber, a critical component of home building, but they would also drive up prices for consumers, putting home ownership out of reach for many Americans. Canada stands as one of the leading global producers and exporters of softwood lumber, according to NC State University's College of Natural Resources. Up to 30% of softwood lumber consumed in the U.S. each year comes from Canada. A small portion of the total market share is captured by other countries. Rajan Parajuli, an associate professor of forest economics and policy at NC State University, said in a recent article. In 2023, the U.S. brought in 28.1 million cubic meters of this lumber from Canada, predominantly for use in building homes and commercial properties. U.S. companies may try to offset tariff-related losses by hiking the prices of Canadian softwood lumber, which could lead to higher costs for building materials and impact the housing market. Trump has temporarily paused the implementation of tariffs against Canada and Mexico, providing a 30-day window for further negotiations aimed at addressing broader trade and security issues. The decision offers a momentary reprieve from the potential spike in construction costs. However, tariffs on Chinese imports remain in effect, which could still influence the broader economic landscape, including sectors beyond housing. We commend President Trump for reaching an agreement with Canada and Mexico to delay the proposed tariffs, avoiding additional strain on a housing market already facing affordability challenges, said Harris in a recent statement. So we saw that when the tariffs were initially put out there, that Trump came to an agreement, as it mentions in this article, came to an agreement with both Mexico and Canada temporarily. And so I think part of me wonders, and I know we want to get into some of the details of this, of what the impact could be on lumber and everything, but I think part of me also wonders just in general, how much of this is him expecting those tariffs to actually stick versus him more strong-arming and trying to get some things from both Canada and Mexico versus the U.S. paying for all of that. So for instance, Mexico, having troops come to the border to help with immigration. And then, on the Canadian side, like trying to get some concessions from them as well. So I'm not really sure, like if he expected these to stick or if he just put out some pretty big numbers for tariffs and then just to get some action to be taken there as well. But what are your thoughts on this, Charles?
Well, I think this article is an overstatement just based on some quick research that I did. The research that I did said that 93% of the lumber used in domestic home building comes from U.S. sources. So we'd have to double check this, right? Just because the internet says it doesn't mean it's real. But I think that's probably pretty close. I definitely think it's, in the 80s, if not higher on a percentage. So the Canadian thing, I don't think is that. It's definitely not catastrophic. Will it cause lumber to tick up a bit? Potentially. What's fascinating about this, and I've had some experience with sawmills and with the lumber industry in general, we've got a lot of timber. We've got tons and tons of timber. Timber actually is cheap, very cheap. It's the sawmill industry and the mills that process it. That's where the bottleneck is. And I think that may be something that may be something that for the government to look at. Maybe we need to shore that up. Maybe there's some incentives. Maybe there's some tax breaks. Maybe there's something we need to do to promote that domestic processing of all the timber that we have. We've got more timber than we can use currently in the U.S. So we've got to be able to get it cut and processed and on a job site. But if we can do that, we can definitely supply our own needs. The other element here, and something I think is really, really important for anybody that touches this industry, whether you're a developer, a home builder, anybody that's in this business, you need to be hedging your risk in some of these areas. Example, I've got some really significant, tens of millions of dollars worth of lumber that are going to be purchased by our development arm in the next 12 to 14 months. Okay, so if that goes up, that's a boo-boo. That's a problem. If that goes up and I don't have this accommodated if I haven't bought this out ahead or for whatever reason, I'm at risk due to those prices. So what we'll do is we'll have a futures contract on lumber. So if lumber goes up, we make money on that contract and that offsets anything that we're losing on a project specific basis because lumber went up. And this is very simple. You think about, any industry where they're very susceptible to specific inputs. A good example would be airlines. So American Airlines is going to have massive hedges against fuel and oil. And if oil goes up, fuel goes up, they're going to make money on their hedges and they're going to lose money on their operations, and those are going to offset each other. So sizing your hedge is a whole science to that. And a good financial analyst can put together a plan for you. But if you're in the construction industry and you're not hedging against some of these big inputs, that is a problem. So I would really strongly encourage anybody that's got these risks to hedge those, and you should be able to essentially wash that risk. And that's the smart way to do it. Now, if you're a homeowner and you're looking to buy in the next year, there is some risk. And it's hard for you to mitigate that as a homeowner. You're probably going to see prices tick up a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be catastrophic. I think we're talking about, we might see a 1.5x on lumber. So on a home, that might be a 5% increase or a 10% increase. We'll have to do the math and see what that is. So it's meaningful, but I don't know that it's a long-term thing. I think that we can metabolize this over a couple of years to where we have enough domestic ability to cover any type of gap. I think that what we are going to potentially see is that, kind of like this article, this is like inflamed language. Like, this is not realistic. I don't think that what they're talking about 4x lumber, that seems hard for me to buy into and believe. So this is probably just for clicks. So I don't think that's the case, but there's a little bit of risk, and I think you should hedge that accordingly.
Yeah, and I think in sync with what you're saying, I did see a quote from Trump where he stated similarly that we have all the lumber we need in the United States domestically. And so I think he still wants to keep that, Canadian lumber available to the US. So, he obviously is looking for his deals that he's looking for to get rid of those tariffs and everything. But I think he's also in sync there with, knowing that we have all the lumber we need here in the US. So, all right. Well, with that said, that's our third and final headline. Anything else you want to add to this, or anything else in general going on?
There's a lot happening. I haven't seen anything that's, so major in the last week that we need to cover it. I think there's going to continue to be, we saw this whole rush of executive orders. I think we're kind of through the biggest push on executive orders. So that seems to be dying out a little bit. Once we get, seems like we're starting to get some stability in the administration. Everybody's kind of figuring out, what they're going to do. You're getting people in place with, like the guy with HUD, they're going to start sorting out what their actions are going to be. So the next whatever 6 months or so, I would say, is very telling. And we're going to start to see some things happen, not immediately, but in the next few months, we'll start to see some noticeable impact. So we'll keep following it as we always do. We'll keep the hot topics here. This is the place to come for all of your land development news, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening in, as always. And if you're not already subscribed to the show, click that button. And also, if you're not personally connected with Charles and me on LinkedIn, give us a connection request on LinkedIn. Love to connect with our listeners and everything out there. But we'll go ahead and come to a close, and we will talk to you all next week.